Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We are here with two instrumental members of the 48 car pit crew, Mike and Anna. And if you guys have not heard yet, TechForce's livery design will be making its debut this Sunday at the Long Beach race. And so we're super excited to chat with Mike and Anna and get a little bit of behind the scenes and hear also how they got to where they were in this fun, exciting world. I'm going to throw it to Anna first to just do a quick intro and let us know what exactly she does on the 48 crew.
Hi, everybody. My name's Anna Chatten, and I am the 48 car gearbox mechanic. So I'm responsible for taking care of the transmission on the race car at the racetrack, and at the shop, I build it and prepare it.
And Anna, you've had more than 22 years of experience in this world. Is that correct? Let us know how have things changed so much and what's it been like?
Yeah, 22 years is correct. That's a little bit harder to say every day. Yeah, no, things have definitely changed in the 22 years I've been in the business. For me, for sure, especially. Motor racing has become more and more diverse since when I started, and that's a really welcome change. So for me personally, when I first started in this business, I tried to downplay the fact that I was a female. I just wanted to fly under the radar, learn my skill, and do my job. And recently, I've felt that that's really, the tides have changed on that. And now it's something that's way more accepted and way more celebrated and encouraged. So I'm glad to see the change in the 22 years, for sure.
Love it. And Mike, you're up next. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Mike Gallic. I'm the 48 car crew chief. Been in racing for 22, 24 years, somewhere around there. So just like Anna, been around, seen a lot of change. Actually had the pleasure of working with Anna the first time about 10, 11 years ago. One of the best gearbox technicians I've ever worked with. So I'm really glad to have her part of this program. And yeah, racing's pretty much all I've ever done my entire life. Started out when I was 14 years old and never looked back.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys both so much. I'm going to hand it over to Mike from TechForce. So we've got two Mikes in the house today, but Mike is going to lead us in some student questions that they have for you guys and just to learn a little bit more.
Well, and thanks so much on behalf of TechForce, guys. It means the world to our students and aspiring techs around the country and around the world to have access to you guys. And I can see we've got a number of them online with us now. TechForce is the largest supporter of tech students in the transportation trades, post-secondary. We give out about $1.2 million, $1.5 million in scholarships a year, just for context for folks. And we try to promote the trade of transportation techs wherever we can. So this is awesome. So we've got a bunch of questions. We'll see how many we can get through. I saw that Rich Iser was actually on the line, and he happens to have the first question we had up, which was, what are some things you've learned from being in the racing industry that you wish you'd known before you started? So remember back 22 years ago.
Anna, you want to go first?
Yeah, I could do that one first. So I think looking back now, one of the things that I've learned over the years, and it's been a slow process. When I first started working in motor racing, we all have our own specialty jobs on the team, right? Like everybody kind of sticks with their responsibilities. And that's kind of instilled in you from the beginning because we want everybody to be really good at what their specific role is. But I think over the years, I've learned also a really important skill is diversity in your job. So the more skills that you can learn, the more things that you can pick up along the way, it makes you a much more marketable person. And I think in the beginning, I kind of overlooked that and just really tunnel visioned on my specific role and my specific job. And I wish in the beginning that I would have focused more on trying to diversify my knowledge. In the last 10 years, I've really tried to do that. So Mike had mentioned that we had worked before together in the past, and that particular team that we worked at together, there was one year where they didn't need somebody to work on gearboxes, which is my specialty. And so they asked if I would work on the front end of the car. And at first I was like, oh, I totally don't want to do that. That's not my thing. But I went ahead and did it anyway. And it was one of the best things I could have done, only because, it gave me a bigger picture idea. Sometimes you get really focused on what you're doing, but you work on a team in motor racing. So you really have to understand what everybody else needs to do to get the job done together. So after that year, I really focused on trying to diversify myself and make sure I have, a good collection of skills to pull from and not just one specific.
Cool. Mike?
Well, this is what I love about having Anna on the team. She just basically said everything I needed to say. But to echo off the back of that, I think one of the biggest things that I didn't realize going into racing was how addictive it was going to be. Once you get it in, there's just no getting rid of it. I mean, I've tried the real world once for about 6 months, and the pace wasn't intense enough for me. And I just got drawn back into racing. That competition, the adrenaline, and just the family network within racing. The racing family is so tightly knit that you are able to rely on everybody. And if you go in there, as Anna said, and you keep your eyes and ears open, you can take in a lot of knowledge that's just going to help you throughout the road down the future. So that's probably one of the biggest things.
Thanks. Got a question from Joseph Carroll at NASCAR Institute down in North Carolina. What excites you most about race day?
First on this one, for me, it's pit stops. It's being able to actually jump over the wall and even though we're all part of the race from the beginning as far as car preparation, and races are won and lost at the shop, because if you show up and there's an issue with the car in the first session, you don't get track time. It just hinders the driver throughout the weekend, and that eventually snowballs into poor qualifying, poor starting position, poor race finish. So being able to jump over that wall, do a good solid pit stop, get back over the wall, look up on the screen and see that we've gained positions because of what we've done out there as a collective group is probably one of my favorite parts of the race.
Cool.
Well, mine for sure is winning. That is definitely the thing I look forward to the most on race day. Obviously, we're involved in motor racing. It's a very competitive business, and the end goal every Sunday or every race day is to win. And the really cool thing about that is you always have that possibility on the start of that race. So for sure, it's winning for me.
Our next one is from Megan Cruz Wingo. She's a student at Solando Community College. And she says they're taking apart automatic transmissions and putting them back together and testing them. And she's like, how do you remember which bolt goes where, Anna?
That's a really funny question. So oddly enough, the gearbox that I work on currently now, I take that thing apart in my sleep pretty much. So it just becomes second nature for me. But to answer her question, I do remember looking back on when I didn't have that vast knowledge to pull from. I was probably like 15, 16. And my mechanical interest came from my dad, obviously. I raced go-karts as a kid with him, and I liked working on stuff. And my first car I had was a first gen, it was like an 82 first gen RX-7, a Mazda RX-7. And it had a carburetor. But I'm not really a carburetor girl because of my age. We kind of focused a little more on fuel injection. So that car had a carburetor, and I remember I wanted to take it apart and know how it worked. And so I attempted that, and I got maybe a quarter of the way into it. And my dad came out in the garage and he's like, whoa, what are you doing? He's like, you're going to be able to put that thing back together. And it happened to be a carburetor that had some electronic emissions controls on it. So it was definitely over my skill set at the time. And he handed me a roll of masking tape and said, you mark everything that comes out of there so you can put it back together. And so I have definitely used tricks like that since then, for sure. It can be a little intimidating, but I think if you stay organized as you take something apart, that helps a lot. So.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Next one's from Devon Pastor Guzman. He's a student at UTI in Sacramento. And he says, how would you suggest getting a job on a racing team? My dream is to have a job on a racing team in any racing category one day. However, I've always wondered, how could I or should I get it started in my journey to being in motorsports?
Well, I would say look in your surrounding area, see if there's any teams to start with. And if you're willing to do the work and make the effort, teams are always going to take people in on a internship, apprenticeship level. I mean, it's how I got started. I just sent my resume, which was very thin at the time because I was only about 15 years old when I was sending it out to teams, and just kept sending it until someone finally got back to me. And when they did, I said, I'm willing to sweep the floors of the shop, do whatever I need to do to just be there and be able to take all the info in. And that's how I got my start, basically. So just keep pounding, keep getting on the phone, calling teams, emailing teams. The internet nowadays, you can get all the info. I didn't have that back then. I had to go through phone books and try to find addresses for racing teams and send letters. Nowadays, you can figure out who a team manager is and who a human resource person is. So just contact everybody, tell them what you want to do, and you'll get your opportunity.
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that. So my story is a little bit different than Mike's. I actually there was a racing school in Northern California that people could come and rent a race car, and they had driving instructors. They also had a mechanics program. And basically it was a year-long apprenticeship. Kind of worked for free for a year, but they taught more mechanics specific to race cars. Unfortunately, I don't really think there's a whole lot of those kind of things that really exist anymore. I mean, that was more than 20 years ago. So like Mike said, the business has kind of changed since then, some for the good, as far as getting your foot in the door, and some for the not so good. But one of the things that he said, then I'll echo as well, is if you're persistent and you really want to do it, like he said, race teams will, definitely entertain the internship idea, and don't count that out, because that is out there. It's available for sure.
Cool, thank you. Next one's from Steve DeMarzo. He's an enthusiast, and it's kind of a technical question. What's your opinion on this new Rule 14.8.1 on wheel guns? Wheel guns must be pneumatic and may not have any electronic devices attached to any part of the wheel gun system, including air lines and regulators.
I think that rule can be broken down into two specific categories. One is cost containment, and the second one would be safety. Obviously, IndyCar and any racing series wants to do what they can nowadays to keep costs down for teams. The technology war can easily explode, and you end up spending massive amounts of money to gain a tenth or two a second in a pit stop, which to most doesn't sound like much, but in racing is huge. At the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, I believe the car at 210 miles an hour on the front straight travels 100 football fields. So you can imagine what a tenth a second means in the pits when you take it back out on track. So teams will spend money to do whatever they can to find an advantage. So limiting us helps everybody, gives a bit more of an even playing field for the smaller teams and the bigger teams. And then second one is the safety side. The more we speed up the pit stops, the more room there is for air, the more room there is for us to get injured over the wall. There's only so fast that we can do things without starting to take shortcuts that compromise our safety. So I'm all for that rule. I think pit stops are fast enough as they are. Engineers wouldn't agree with me, but I think from a safety perspective, being over the wall and having those guys buzz by you, I think we're in a good spot.
Great. Got another one from Dylan Austin. He's a student at NASCAR Tech Institute. He's asking, do you see electric race cars in the near future?
They're definitely going to happen, whether people encourage it or not. I'm a fan of the internal combustion engine. I probably will be till I die, because I'm a mechanic and I like the concept of that. But it for sure is coming. Obviously, motor racing follows the manufacturing world, and that's the direction we're currently pointed. Whether it be electric cars with batteries or, there's all sorts of different ways to look at that. But it's for sure going to happen sooner than probably we're all ready for, I think.
Yeah, I think as the technology evolves, we already have a somewhat electric racing series that's out there. I think as the technology evolves, we'll probably end up morphing into something maybe hybrid, obviously hybrid with IndyCar coming in a couple of years. But it certainly is the way of the future. Will it be all there is? I doubt it. I welcome the addition of more series, because the more racing we have out there, the better it is. But I don't think it's going to be the only racing we have.
I would race anything. So, I mean, I'll definitely support it one way or the other. I mean, to me, racing is racing. So I'm in, but I'd prefer some gasoline too.
Excellent. Next one's from Mike McCord. He's an instructor at TCAT in Jackson. I think that's Tennessee. Assuming, you're in your dream job, he's asking, if you weren't part of IndyCar, what would your dream job be?
That's a tough one. So I find myself, obviously I work in a technical field, and it kind of doesn't allow for a lot of creativity per se. And so I think if I had it to do over again, I would love to work on someone's car collection or restore older cars. I think you can put a little bit of your personality in that. And that's intriguing to me because I don't get to put a lot of my personal personality into gearboxes I build currently.
Do you have a particular classic car genre you're into?
Ooh, man, that's a hard pick. So I really like old motorcycles. My number one pick of a car to restore when I have money and no kids and a lot of time on my hands, it's a ways off for me, but is an old Datsun Z car. Those are my favorite. So that's on my list.
Awesome. Yeah, Mike?
For me, I've never really put much thought into it since this is all I ever wanted to do. But it would probably have to be something relating to crisis management, because I like stressful situations, and I think that's where I'm able to come in and kind of calm things down and slow things down and process them in my mind and help people figure out what we need to do to go forward. So I think that's what it'd be for me.
Cool. Got a battery of different questions coming down the line. Some of them are really straightforward for you, and then others you might want to elaborate on. First one, how much does a tire weigh?
Front tire and wheel is 30 pounds. The rear is 35.
And while we're on tires, how does the lug nut stay on the rim?
So in IndyCar, it's not captive like it would be in Formula One. So the wheel gun socket has a variety of magnets and an O-ring that retains onto a groove onto the wheel nut.
Cool. And this is quite a lug nut theme here. Have you ever cross-threaded a lug nut?
Mike,
I haven't. But it's been done.
Yeah, let's see. I've got something especially for Anna. Some folks are wondering, what it's like to be, and you kind of talked about it at the beginning, but what would you say to a young girl who wants to get into the industry?
Oh, that's always a good question. I mean, persistence, I think it's really important lately. As I've gotten older, my perspective has changed quite a bit. I have 2 little girls now, so we tend to look at things differently. And I think if I could, say anything to a young girl wanting to get in the business advice-wise is really find your voice and stick with it. I think that I questioned myself a lot in the beginning, and I wish I wouldn't have done that, because generally I had a pretty good idea what was going on, but in the beginning I lacked confidence, and that's hard. That's hard to gain, especially when you're, one of the only females. And a lot of times feels like everyone's kind of looking and waiting for you to make a mistake. That's also what's made me really good. But I think finding your voice and trusting it is really, really important. And that's a hard thing to do, but you got to point yourself in the right direction and don't look back.
So how the staying humble when you're new to a crew versus, speaking up when you have an opinion or know something, any guidance on how to finesse that?
Yeah, it's a balance. I think, Mike can reiterate this. You work very closely with 8 other people, and trust is a huge thing. And gaining people's trust is part of it. Obviously that doesn't happen overnight. So you have to be able to bring your skills, a pretty solid skill set to be able to do that. But yeah, I mean, you have to trust the person explicitly that you're working next to, because basically you're putting together a race car that's going to go 220 miles an hour. And there can be a lot of consequences to that if you don't do it right. So Trust is a big one. You have to earn that trust for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge one. As Anna said, these cars are doing extreme speeds, not only do you have to look after the driver, but we got to make sure that nothing fails so that nobody in the pit lane gets injured, nobody in the crowd gets injured. There's a lot of responsibility, and you have to be able to trust the people that are working on the cars. And in order to be good at what you do, you have to understand what other people are doing. And that's what allows the flow to just go flawlessly. And yeah, that's the key to it, is just keep your eyes open and look after each other. I tell the guys every race weekend, just look after each other, keep an eye out after each other, and slow is fast. Pay attention to what we do, and the rest will come.
We hear the slow is fast a lot. For the maybe somebody who's not familiar with the concept, what's that mean?
If you've ever heard, say, Michael Jordan or Wayne Gretzky talk about how, or people talk about them and talked about how they were able to slow the game down, see the game in a different way to other people. And it really essentially what it is don't try to rush through things. Do things one step at a time, break everything down into one motion. So for instance, on a pit stop, when the car comes in, the first objective is to get that wheel gun on the wheel nut. The second one is to pull the trigger, pull the wheel gun back, put your gun down, pull the wheel off, pick your other wheel up, put it on, get that gun back up, get the nut on. If you break that all down into segments and you do them slowly and repetitively, that muscle memory kicks in and it just becomes routine. And that's the slow is fast. Just do everything with precision every time, and the speed will come.
Awesome. Anna, one of our women asked about, do you have any special restrictions as a female in a pit crew? She asked about hair length, nails, jewelry. Are there certain things you have to do as a woman that the guys don't have to worry about? I guess unless the guys have long hair.
Yeah. I love that question. And I actually don't think I've had anybody ever ask me that. No, there's absolutely no restrictions. One thing I love about, or that I pride myself on, I guess I should say, is I'm a mechanic, but I'm also a female, and I've always loved being a female. I get my nails done every other week. They really need to be done. We tested yesterday and I broke one, so I don't really want to show them off, but I always get my nails done. They don't hinder me at all. My hair is fairly long. That can be kind of like a safety thing sometimes if you think about it, but I usually have it pulled back. Sometimes I forget to take my earrings out when I put my helmet on, and I really regret that about halfway through a race. But other than that, there's no real restrictions.
Awesome. And Mike, here's one for you. What's the fastest you've ever changed a tire?
I think a couple of years ago, I did a 3.2 seconds. If you're between 3.9 to 4.1, you're up there with the fastest. That 3.2, I don't think was in a race. I think it was in pit stop practice. But if you're anywhere between 3.5 to 4.1, you're hauling out there and you're going to be all right.
That's moving. You kind of talked about this one earlier, so we might have covered it, but how do you start working on a pit crew? You talked about interning and stuff, but are there any other tricks or suggestions for how to start on a crew?
Well, Anna obviously mentioned that racing school. I don't know if those are still around, but I believe there might be one in Indianapolis. There's obviously NASCAR Institute as well. Those are great ways to get in. From there, contacts will, you'll be able to find some contacts to teams and whatnot. Again, just look up any teams, contact them, internships. And then once you get in, a lot of teams are going to want to develop people to do pit stops because it's not really something that's all that common. So the key is get your foot in the building. Get your foot in the building. Tell them you want to do pit stops. Tell them you want to learn. You want to help out, whether it be helping with building the pit stop car or doing maintenance on the pit stop car, and then getting an opportunity to play around and practice a couple times at the end of the day. You just got to do whatever you can to get that opportunity and to show that you really want to do it. And I think that's the key, is to really be persistent.
I think one thing I can add to that is, nuts and bolts are nuts and bolts. They're the same on race cars too. One of the interesting things I like to always bring to the table is I've had a number of jobs in my 20, for different teams in my 22 years. And one thing, if you do end up in the motorsports route, a lot of things in motor racing can't be formally taught. You learn them on the job. And so you need to be really open and receptive to learning when you get there, because it's not things that you can really learn at any tech school. You can learn the fundamentals, but when you show up to a team, a lot of times teams have specific ways they want things done. And that's stuff you'll learn on the job for sure. So one of the really cool things about working in motor racing is, like I said, Mike and I have the opportunity to work together again this year. And I'm really selective about what teams I go to now, because I still learn every day, and I want to learn new things from new people. There's all teams have different things to offer in that respect. So yeah, I mean, if you've got an open mind and you're willing to listen and learn, you can be successful in motor racing for sure.
Cool. And a perfect segue for the next question there. Somebody asked, what training or credentials do I need to work on a pit crew? You kind of mentioned there a little bit, but are there anything in particular you look for?
Initially, no. There is no specific credential. Obviously, if you have mechanical background, mechanical knowledge, it's going to help you. But once you get in a team, teams like to breed and form their staff to work to their operations and to work to their procedures. So once again, it's just, if you have the basic mechanical knowledge and an open mind and you're willing to learn and listen, the team will mold you to what they want. And that's what's the most important to me. When we get new employees that come in, one of the things I like to remind them is that our team is an engineering driven team, and we have our procedures and our way of doing things. And we're always open to different ideas and different ways, but we have to make sure we funnel them through to engineering, because that is what drives the process in our team. And that's why we're such a successful team, is that we have a process and we are driven to that process. So when we get new people, we try to teach them to bring their ideas, but make sure that they grow into the mold that we want them to be in.
Cool. Anna, anything on that? Anything else to add there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's an ongoing process, I guess, as far as like how you further your career. I don't know if the question was driven specifically towards just doing pit crew stuff. That is a skill that we work on a lot. It's a very repetitive thing, and we spend a lot of time perfecting it. So, I mean, as far as a skill set from performing a pit stop or working in the shop, might be two different things. And, the pit crew thing, for sure, I think that a skill on that maybe Mike didn't mention is you do need some physical agility to do that. It's not, changing a tire. I physically can't change a rear tire competitively. I'm not strong enough to do it. I'm also not physically capable to probably fuel a car. So, those are things that we do. We train 5 days a week to be physically fit enough to perform a pit stop. So that might be, if you were interested in doing pit stops specifically, physically training to be able to do that would be something you would want to consider too.
So besides the practice doing pit stop and the repetition, the muscle memory from that, what do the two of you do for just general physical fitness? Because you mentioned you got to be fit for it.
Yeah.
Well, other than work, when I get home, we work out every day at the shop. We have a fitness coach, and as Anna said, we have a pit stop practice program that we do that's pretty intense. I do a lot of running, not crazy amounts. I'll do 2-3 miles a day. But usually I log anywhere from 17 to 20,000 steps a day just at the shop. So there's a lot of physical activity going on no matter what.
And any secret training regimen? Got some yoga in there or something?
I do love yoga. I haven't got to do any in the recent weeks though. I've always been a runner. I always like to run, but as Mike said, our daily job is pretty physical. We tested yesterday in Barber Motorsports Park in Alabama, and I think my watch said that I did 26,000 steps yesterday, and that was just a racetrack day. So, wow. It's not a sit at a desk kind of job. That's for sure.
That's what we hear from tons of students. What do you want? I don't want to be chained to a desk. So there you are, validating that. Here's a fun one. Do Do you guys ever get to drive the race car? Assuming not in a race, of course, but do you ever get to drive the car?
Not an IndyCar. I had the opportunity to drive a NASCAR around Charlotte when I worked for a team that was in NASCAR several years ago. We had a little bit of a team function, but that was the only time in the 20 some odd years that I've been able to actually drive something that I've worked on.
How about you? Had anybody here nicer to you and let you get behind the wheel?
No, not in an IndyCar. When I kind of worked my way up through the ranks of motor racing before I worked on an IndyCar team. So definitely, I got to drive some Formula cars when I was much younger, and I was a go-kart racer. We still go karting. My girls race now, so I definitely like to get behind the wheel and have some fun. But in IndyCar, not so much. Although last year I did get to go for a 2-seater ride around Laguna, courtesy of Carvana as well. So that was pretty amazing because you work on these things all the time, right? So to like get a ride in one and see what that felt like, it was re-solidified how cool and awesome IndyCar racing really is to me. So
Cool.
And I'm really hoping they do that again because I'd like a 2-seater ride.
Let's see what you do. Anna, somebody was asking if you get crazy reactions from race fans when they notice you're a female. Anything come to mind, or do you get reactions?
Yeah, you get a few. I mean, there's always one in the bunch, right? So oddly enough, some of the most negative reactions I get are from fans, not from people I work with or drivers or anything like that. Recently, my most recent one, sometimes I laugh at them, right? Because you have to. But I was carrying 2 5-gallon buckets that were full of water that we use in pit lane in case there's a fire incident or something like that. And they weren't like super heavy, but I had one in each hand, right? And I was walking to go dump them out. And it was at the end of the race. So he might have had a little bit of liquid courage, but he yelled down at me from the grandstands and said, "Hey, why don't you get a man to do that for you?"
Too bad you couldn't toss it on him. Huh?
Yeah, I know, right? I thought about it for a second, but there's always one in the bunch. But, really, honestly, that is with anything, I think. Like any job you have, there's always going to be somebody that's hard to deal with, or, whether it be a fan or a coworker or something like that. It is what it is. And I for sure don't let that bother me, because if I did, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to all of you folks.
How many tires do you go through in a race?
It can be anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 sets on a street road course. The Indy 500, we get given 11 sets on race day. There's been times where we've done 6 or 7 pit stops come race day, sometimes more. So it just varies depending on the distance of the race and how many yellow flags come out. For the month of May, for the Indy 500, Firestone gives us, I think it's 32 sets of tires for the month. So yeah, go through a fair amount of tires.
Keeping the tire theme going, questions. What do you do with all the used tires?
Firestone takes their tires back so that no other manufacturers can break down their compounds and figure out what kind of technology they have, and they recycle them and somehow find a way of turning them into something different.
Cool. This is kind of a tag team on what you were talking about earlier. That you answered that you obviously have tire changing drills, but they're asking, what's that look like? What's involved in that?
So we have an actual IndyCar with an electric motor. So there's some electrification of IndyCar there already that we use in the shop, and we'll do anywhere from 3 to 4 static pit stops, so without the car rolling, and then we'll back it up, and we have a pit stop area that replicates what we have at the racetrack. So pit wall, the fuel rig, all the guns, same setup as we would have trackside. And we'll go through about 4 or 5 rollers just to make sure that everybody can get that practice in, that muscle memory going, and just perfect their craft.
Here's one for both of you, and if there's secret sauce in there, of course, we don't want you to divulge any team secrets. But they're asking, what do you do to prepare for a race? Thinking physical warm up, stretching, eating, bathroom, etc. is the question.
How about you go first on this one, Anna?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that I physically prepare. I guess for me personally, not really. I think, before green flag on race day, it's pretty busy. It's pretty busy with car prep and things like that. I'm a female, obviously, and we have to put on a fire suit. So I definitely always make sure I go to the bathroom before I put on my fire suit, because porta potties when you're a female in a fire suit, I don't recommend it. So I try and find the real bathroom and make sure that all goes as planned before I put that thing on. So that's probably most of the time all I have time for.
For me, I definitely try to get sleep the night before, especially nowadays. Sleep's very important for everything. But I think the most important part is just to remember to breathe. It's a hectic day. Things are crazy leading up to the race. You get to the grid, you've got all that fanfare going on around you, and then the race starts rolling. I actually had my watch, I think it was St. Pete, first race of the year this year, gave me an alarm because my heart rate was going high, but I didn't have a high activity level. So when I look back at the time, I realized, hey, that was right at the start of the race. So you've got the adrenaline watching the start, having to get everybody prepared for the situation of having to react to possibly an incident in the first corner, having to change wings, a pit stop or whatnot. So all that stuff's running through my mind. I'm trying to communicate it to everybody, and my heart rate's just going up, but I'm just sitting there watching a screen. So you just got to remember to breathe so you can bring that all back down and just focus. So those are my two biggest things: sleep and focus.
Here's one that I think we know the answer to, but I'm going to ask it because somebody submitted it. Can you switch positions with others on the pit crew?
In a race, no, but in the off season, we certainly invite people to try different things. You don't know, you might have got to the maximum potential in one position and you try something else, and all of a sudden you've got room to improve on that and improve on something else. So yeah, we definitely try things out in the off season, try to tweak procedures, but come race day and once the season's going, no, people won't swap out.
There's one that's Anna specific. It's a two-parter. You strike me as a positive person, so I think you'll obsess on the second one. But what's the hardest and the best part about being a woman in your position?
Oh, that's a tough question. The hardest part is probably, I would say, it's gotten easier for me over the years, obviously, because my skill set has improved. But I definitely feel like you get scrutinized a little bit more, just because not everybody's always going to be comfortable with you. But I have found that I make it a point to surround myself with people that are comfortable with that idea of me being on their team. That's why I was really excited to work with Mike again. So, and people can see the value in that, obviously, because there is. And I think one of the best parts about being a female, probably the best part is I get to do all sorts of fun things like this and talk to you people and encourage other females to get into the sport. That part's really cool. As I mentioned, used to hate that part of it, but now that I have two little girls, encouraging females to go out of their comfort zone and do something that they might not traditionally have thought of, that is a really fun part of my job that I get to do. And I get to encourage that because I am a female. So.
Cool. Mike, you can't answer that question. Sorry. Here's a good one. Do you have backups? People to back you up if something happens at the race. How's that work?
We do. We've got a couple people that are on the backside of the wall who will have in pit stop practice different positions just in case something unfortunate should happen and we need to slip somebody over the wall and replace someone. So yeah, we're always ready for that situation. In fact, Anna is going to be doing some pit stop work this weekend in Long Beach. She'll be doing the air jack because we've got somebody who's not going to be able to make it because of a personal situation at home. So
my guest appearance from retirement.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think you largely covered these other couple of questions, Anna, that were specifically to you about if you thought people were more welcoming to female techs now, and if you had any obstacles because you're a woman. And I think you made an important point earlier too. Sometimes just because you're new, but obviously, if there's anything else you'd care to add around those kind of questions.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, 22 years ago when I first started in this business, there wasn't any other female mechanics. Shortly after I started, I feel like there's a lot of female engineering presence. There was a couple when I first started, and now there's a lot. I mean, the female presence in the paddock, you know, people often refer to motor racing as a male dominated sport. And I always hate that term because, you know, obviously there's more men than women, but men don't dominate it anymore. One of the ladies that works with us at Ganassi on our sports car team, she's an engineer, and she just won the 12 Hours of Sebring as a lead engineer. So as far as I'm concerned, she's a female dominating in motor racing. So that male domination is slowly slipping away, and we're here, and I couldn't be happier about it. So.
And I agree. The more people we have, the more women we have, and the more skilled people we have, the stronger we are together. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman in this industry or any.
Awesome. Thank you. That's it for the questions that I saw submitted. Allison, I don't know if there's any coming in from the chat or.
I think we're all set. You guys covered so much, and I feel like that was very insightful. We really appreciate your time, and on behalf of Carvana Racing and on behalf of TechForce Foundation, we can't wait to see you guys out there this weekend, and thanks for all that you do.
Thank you guys very much. It was our pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.